Pam Bondi's Justice Department got caught concealing the memo driving Trump's secret war on so-called narco-terrorists. Senator Welch just ripped the lid off that cover-up, exposing how reckless and dangerous it truly is. Proof that the truth always surfaces, no matter how hard they try to bury it.
Mr. President, the President of the United States says that the United States is at war. In the past 7 weeks, President Trump has ordered U.S. forces to take military action to destroy 10 boats in international waters. That has resulted in the death of more than 40 possible drug couriers. President Trump has also told Congress he's determined that the United States is at war with what he calls narco-terrorists. He's also said that he's taking steps to escalate military action against Venezuela and Colombia, and of course is sending U.S. warships, fighter planes, and special forces to their coast. And he's also openly tossing around threats of airstrikes against targets in the sea and on land. You know, the questions before us as the United States Senate are clear and they are urgent. Are the president's actions steering the American people into yet another undeclared war? And would it be legal for the president to expand this war to the sovereign territories of countries in South America, as he is now threatening to do? Mr. President, the clear answer is no. That this president, no president, has the legal authority without congressional authorization to take America into military conflict. There has been no credible legal experts that have defended the president's actions, with one exception, and of course that is the Attorney General, who has provided an opinion to the president. We are told, but we have not seen, that what he's doing is legal. That's without precedent. It's without precedent for the top legal official in this country to give an opinion that it's legal to go to war without congressional authorization. But it's clearly the legal advice the president wanted and won't even share with the members of the United States Senate. The president, of course, seems to be basing the legality of these actions on the declaration that drug traffickers are terrorists. We all join in hating what the drug traffickers do, but it's also based on that legal opinion, the Office of Legal Counsel at the Justice Department, that we're told gives legal cover for the president to do what is clearly beyond the authority of a chief executive. We know nothing about that opinion, and all in this body who have called for it to be released are doing the right thing. We know that under the U.S. Constitution, the president does not have authority to start a war without congressional authorization. It is an Article 1 responsibility of the Congress of the United States, and there's a reason for that that's so very important. If we are going to ask, with the authority of Congress and the executive, men and women to go to war on behalf of defending our country, that profoundly important decision that is being made by Congress but is putting in harm's way the men and women who serve in the military, there should be a debate and there should be a vote, there should be responsibility, and there should be accountability. And simply the determination by the president that he's attacking a group of what he calls terrorists, narco-terrorists, does not by itself make it legal under the Constitution. You know, some people may say, what's the big deal? These are bad folks. Drugs are terrible. We all agree with that. But it's not up to the president to determine whether we go to war. It's up to Congress. Should we be going to war with Venezuela? You know, all of us are on board, Republicans and Democrats, with the fight against narcotics, illegal drugs, fentanyl in particular, which mostly enter the U.S. through Mexico and on the Pacific Ocean, are wreaking havoc on our communities. It's happened in Vermont, as well as West Virginia, Idaho, Florida, Montana, every other state. Our sons and daughters, mothers and fathers are struggling with addiction and dying from overdose. So yes, this is a very serious problem, and we should be doing far more to deal with it, treating addiction in our own country, bolster our local police forces, our mental health resources, and to work with source countries to stop the production and transshipment of these dangerous drugs. This has not been a partisan issue, and in fact, it is an issue where, when I served in the House, there was Republican and Democratic collective action to provide treatment that is providing real-world help in real time to folks in your state and in mine. But laws matter, and the Constitution matters. If the president does want to start a war, if he wants to put America's troops in harm's way, he needs to seek authorization from Congress. And as my colleagues and I know too well, the United States has a very unfortunate history of wars, forever wars, started by presidents who misrepresented the facts. From the USS Maine incident used to justify the war against Spain, to the Gulf of Tonkin resolution incident to justify the Vietnam War, 60,000 young Americans killed, to President Bush's stretching of the facts about Iraq's alleged weapons of mass destruction to launch a disastrous forever war. In each of these cases, majorities of our predecessors on this very Senate floor abdicated their responsibility to question the president's intentions and justifications for war. And that is why I hope that each of my colleagues, each of us here, will join me in questioning the president's legal basis to carry out these killings and to potentially launch attacks against one or more South American countries. We should demand that Congress assert its constitutional obligation to determine where and why the United States goes to war. You know, as I mentioned, we all hate the scourge of drugs. But why are we spending billions of dollars in this effort in Venezuela, while at the same time taking funding away for treatment programs here at home that actually have been proven effective to help the most vulnerable Americans that are actually struggling with addiction to fentanyl and other drugs? The Department of Justice has also diverted thousands of Drug Enforcement Administration funds and other law enforcement personnel from their critical missions to carry out the president's immigration agenda. Yet the department has inexplicably shut down the Organized Crime and Drug Enforcement Task Force, which has been effective in dismantling thousands of criminal organizations, and unilaterally the administration has terminated hundreds of grants that do provide critical funding to state and local law enforcement, folks on the ground in the community, helping folks who are struggling with addiction and helping law enforcement get to the sellers of those terrible drugs. In fact, the administration's fiscal year 2026 budget would slash the high-intensity drug trafficking areas program by more than a third, from $298 million to $196 million. And under the direction of Attorney General Bondi, federal drug prosecutions, I have no idea how this happened, but federal drug prosecutions have dropped to the lowest level in decades. A fact I find shocking. So when the president claims his new war is about protecting America from drugs, it's a fair question. Why are we doing so little? Why are we taking money away from treatment? Why are we taking money away from high-intensity drug enforcement? Why are we not prosecuting more, instead prosecuting so much less? Mr. President, it's up to the Senate to do its job. We have seen from history that our failure to assert our constitutional responsibility to decide whether to send our military to war has resulted in grievous suffering for the American people and a weakening of our national security. Mr. President, in asserting our responsibility, at the bare minimum, this United States Senate should demand to see Attorney General Bondi's legal analysis that the President has used to justify his use of the U.S. military to engage in these attacks. Mr. President, I yield back.
Senator Peter Welch didn't just speak, he drew a constitutional red line in the sand. His speech wasn't another partisan jab. It was a warning flare shot across the political sky. What he's exposing is far bigger than party lines or policy disputes. Welch is calling out what appears to be an undeclared war, launched by a president determined to bend the law around his will and a Justice Department that seems complicit in helping him do it. At the center of this storm is a secret, a classified legal memo, written by Attorney General Pam Bondi, that reportedly gives President Trump the green light to use military force against so-called narco-terrorists. The catch? No one in Congress has been allowed to see it. And yet U.S. forces have already acted on it, destroying boats in international waters and killing more than 40 people. Let that sink in. The President of the United States has allegedly ordered lethal military strikes in international territory, with no congressional authorization, no public debate, and no declaration of war. Just a memo, hidden from the people's representatives, saying it's somehow legal. Under the Constitution, only Congress can declare war. That's not a formality. It's one of the foundational checks designed to prevent exactly this kind of power grab. But the Trump administration seems to think it can skip that step by playing a dangerous linguistic trick, rebranding drug traffickers as narco-terrorists and claiming that label magically grants the president wartime authority. Welch isn't buying it, and neither should anyone who values the rule of law. Because when the executive branch starts rewriting definitions to expand its own power, democracy starts to collapse in silence. This isn't about semantics, it's about sovereignty. It's about whether the Constitution still means what it says. Pam Bondi's Justice Department, by allegedly producing this secret memo, is operating like a shadow government, deciding in private what war means and when it can begin. The memo may well be the most dangerous piece of paper in Washington right now, because if it stands, it effectively hands any president the ability to start wars by wordplay, not by law. And we've seen this movie before. From the Gulf of Tonkin resolution that plunged America into Vietnam to the weapons of mass destruction lies that justified Iraq. Presidents have a long history of pushing the limits of their war powers while Congress looks the other way. Each time, the result has been the same: thousands of lives lost, trillions wasted, and a nation left asking how it happened again. Welch is warning that history is repeating itself, this time under the banner of a war on drugs. And it's brilliant political theater, because who wants to sound weak on crime or soft on cartels? But Welch's point cuts through the smokescreen. This isn't a war on drugs, it's a war on accountability. While Trump sends warships to South America, his administration has been quietly gutting the very programs that fight addiction at home. Federal funding for treatment and prevention programs has been slashed. Grants that support local recovery initiatives are disappearing. Even the high-intensity drug trafficking areas program, one of the most effective partnerships between local and federal law enforcement, has been cut by a third. So if this administration truly cared about saving American lives from drugs, the numbers would reflect it, but they don't. Instead, we see a show of force abroad, missiles and headlines, while the real battle, the one happening in American homes and communities, gets ignored. It's the illusion of toughness, a performance of power designed to distract from the erosion of democratic norms happening underneath. That's why Welch's speech landed like a thunderclap, because it wasn't just about legal theory, it was about moral clarity. He reminded Congress that the authority to send Americans into harm's way doesn't belong to one man, no matter how powerful or popular he claims to be. It belongs to the people through their representatives. When that authority is hijacked behind closed doors, the system collapses. The separation of powers ceases to function, and democracy, quietly and efficiently, begins to hollow out. If Bondi's memo remains secret, if it becomes accepted precedent, then future presidents will inherit that unchecked power. They'll be able to launch strikes anywhere, anytime, against anyone, so long as they can invent a justification that fits the narrative of the moment. That's not how a democracy operates. That's how empires behave, arrogantly, unilaterally, and inevitably toward collapse. Welch's demand for transparency isn't just a call for oversight. It's an act of of preservation, because secrecy, especially when tied to war powers, breeds corruption and abuse faster than anything else. The Justice Department cannot be allowed to redefine the limits of executive authority in the dark. The public deserves to know what the law supposedly says. Congress deserves to debate it, and the president must be held to the same constitutional boundaries that every other citizen lives under. This isn't partisan, it's patriotic. If we fail to confront this now, we normalize it. Every crisis becomes a pretext for unilateral military action. Every political opponent becomes a threat. Every legal limit becomes optional. That's the path from democracy to authoritarianism, and it doesn't happen overnight. It happens through 1,000 small erosions, each justified as temporary, necessary, or for our protection. Welch's stand is a reminder that the Constitution only works if those in power actually respect it. It's not a suggestion. It's a binding contract, one written in the blood and sacrifice of generations who refuse to let kings rule unchecked. Right now, that contract is being tested again. If a president can secretly wage war with the stroke of a pen and a hidden memo, then the very meaning of democracy is at stake. The American people have a right to know when their country is at war and why. They have a right to know what justifications are being made in their name. This is about constitutional survival. It's about making sure that the United States remains a nation of laws, not a nation governed by classified opinions and political ambition. So Welch is right to demand that the memo be made public. He's right to demand debate. He's right to insist that Congress do its job, because if we don't draw the line now, the line will disappear. Unchecked power never limits itself. It only grows until someone has the courage to say enough. That's what Welch just did, and if you care about truth, transparency, and accountability, now's the time to stand with him, because democracy doesn't die in one dramatic moment. It erodes when we stop paying attention. This fight isn't about party, it's about principle. The question isn't whether you support Trump or Welch. The question is whether you still believe in the Constitution, the same document every elected official swears to defend. If you believe in that promise, then you understand what's at stake, and that's exactly why we're here, to expose these hidden mechanisms of power, to shine a light on the backroom deals and classified memos that quietly rewrite the rules of democracy. This platform exists for that reason, to connect the dots between law, history, and accountability. So if you want to stay informed, if you believe that transparency is not optional, make sure to subscribe, support independent journalism, join the conversation, because the fight for democracy doesn't happen in the headlines, it happens in the details, in the memos, in the votes that never happen, and in the silences that too many choose to keep. Senator Welch refused to stay silent, and history will remember that.